So in this video, I'm going to talk about a situation called the prisoner's dilemma, and it's going to help us to understand why it might be very frequently in your best interest to act altruistically because of the social response to the prisoner's dilemma. So the first thing we need to do is understand the prisoner's dilemma. We're interested in this because it's sort of intrinsically important, but it's also going to help us evaluate descriptive egoism. So let's get into the prisoner's dilemma. So let's imagine the following scenario. There are two criminal conspirators acting together. They've committed a small crime and a big crime. The police know several things about them. They know that the two criminal conspirators have committed both of these crimes, and they have evidence they can use in court of the conspirators' guilt for the small crime, and they've arrested the conspirators. But the police don't have usable evidence of guilt for the large crime. They know they've done it, but they don't have evidence they can use in court. So what the police want to do, though, is get evidence that the conspirators have committed a large crime. So the penalties, so there's a 2-year sentence for the small crime, and there's a 10-year sentence for both the small and the big crime. So if the conspirators are convicted only of what the police currently have evidence for, they'll be in prison for 2 years. If they're convicted of both of the crimes, they'll be in prison for a total of 10. So if both conspirators are silent, then they'll each receive the 2-year sentence and nothing more, because the police won't have any other evidence for the big crime, and so the conspirators won't be convicted of the big crime. So how are the police going to proceed in this situation? Well, they're going to separate the two conspirators so that they can't communicate with each other. And then they're going to make the following offer to each. They're going to say, look, if you defect, if you inform on your conspirator, if you tell us about the big crime you committed and how your conspirator helped you, then you'll get a year off of your sentence. And your conspirator will get the 10-year sentence for both. Of course, the consequence, so you benefit, right? But your conspirator is going to get in more trouble. Your conspirator is going to get the full 10-year sentence. So that's the police make that offer to you if you're the conspirator, and they make the same offer to your conspirator, and you and your conspirator cannot communicate because you're in separate interrogation rooms. So this is how if you're the prisoner, you're in the dilemma. So let's suppose you are in the dilemma, you're one of these two prisoners, and this is a grid that sort of shows what the possible outcomes are depending upon your actions and your conspirator's actions. So let's say you're X, so you're the orange, and your conspirator is Y, and that's the violet. Okay, so you might both stay loyal and silent, so you are in the left column there, and your conspirator is in the top row. So you're both loyal and silent. So that means you're each going to be convicted of the small crime, but not of the big crime, because the police have the evidence of the small crime, but they don't have any evidence of the big crime. So you both are going to lose 2 years. You're going to get -2. You're each going to get -2. So in that top left square of the grid, we have -2, -2. We have -2 in violet, because your conspirator is going to get 2 years in prison, and we have -2 in orange, because you're going to get 2 years in prison. But you might think, well, maybe I should defect. Maybe I should inform on my conspirator. I'm going to get a year off. So let's suppose you do that, but your conspirator stays loyal and silent. So Y is loyal and silent, so we're still in the top row. But you, X, have decided to defect and inform, so now we're in the right column. Well, what happens? So because you defect and inform, Y is going to get the full sentence of 10 years, so Y gets -10. And you get the year off your sentence, and you're only convicted of the small crime because your conspirator isn't informing, and you get a year off of that sentence, so you only have -1. You're only in prison for 1 year. Okay? So if Y is loyal and silent, it's in your interest to defect and inform. Your -2 is better than -1. It's only 1 year in prison instead of 2. Now let's suppose instead that you stay loyal and silent, but Y defects and informs. Well, then the outcomes are reversed. Y is convicted only of the small crime because they only have evidence of the small crime. Y gets the 1-year bonus, and so Y has only -1, whereas you, being convicted of both crimes and getting no bonus, are at -10. Okay? Well, in that situation, of course, you could have defected. And indeed, if you had defected, you would have been better off, because you would have gone from -10 to -9. If we see that by looking at the bottom right-hand corner, what happens when you defect and inform in orange, and Y defects and informs in violet, well, then you each get convicted of both crimes, -10 and -10, but you each get the 1-year bonus, and so it's -9, -9. Okay, so those are the 4 possible outcomes. You're both loyal and silent, then it's 2 years for each of you. If you defect and inform, but your buddy is loyal and silent, it's 10 years for your buddy, 1 year for you. If your buddy defects and informs, but you're loyal and silent, it's 10 years for you, 1 for your buddy. If you both defect and inform, it's 9 years for each of you. And of course, all these numbers are negative because these are penalties, and you want the least penalty possible. So let's think about this situation for a little bit. So you, X, you benefit from defecting whatever Y does, right? So if we're in the top row where Y is loyal, then you go, if you defect, then you go from -2 to -1. And if we're in the bottom row where Y defects, then we go from -10 to -9. So whatever Y does, it's better for you, X, to defect. And the same thing is true for Y, right? If your Y can be loyal or defect, and so when Y defects, Y goes to the bottom row. And whichever column we're in, it's better for Y to go to the bottom row. If we're in the left column where you're loyal, Y goes from -2 to -1. If we're in the right column where you've defected, then Y goes from -10 to -9. So it's better for you to defect no matter what Y does, because you always get 1 year less. And it's better for, and you don't have any impact. Remember, you can't communicate, so whatever you do doesn't affect what your partner's going to do. And similarly, your partner is always, because your partner can't interact with you, the only thing that partner can do to improve their situation is to defect. And whatever you do, their situation is improved. So in both cases, both for you and for your partner, you both benefit from defecting regardless of whatever your partner does. And that means that if you're acting in a purely self-interested way, it's better for you to defect. So your defection, it benefits you no matter what, but it costs your partner a lot more, right? You get only a year, you benefit, your sentence is improved by 1 year, but your partner's sentence is made worse by 8 years. And the same thing is true for Y. Y can defect, and Y benefits from defecting no matter what, but the benefit they get is only 1 year, and they cost you 8 years. Okay? So this is what's called the prisoner's dilemma, and there are 3 features that define it. First of all, each of you is better off, each participant is better off if they pursue the self-interest, right, than pursuing the group interest. Each person, no matter what the other person does, benefits by defecting. And yeah, but if all the participants pursue their own self-interest, they're all worse off, right? Because what happens? Well, if I pursue my self-interest, or if you're X, you pursue your self-interest, you defect. Your partner pursues their self-interest, and they defect, and now we're in the bottom right square. That's the -9, -9. So you're both defecting because you each want to do whatever is best for yourself, but by doing that, you screw your partner, and so you both end up in the bottom right square, and now that's the worst possible situation for you guys, right? Any of the other situations in terms of the overall group is better. Right? The bottom situation has the most years in jail. The top left, total years in prison is 4. The top right and bottom left are 11 years, and the bottom square is total of 18 years. So if each individually pursues their self-interest, whatever is best for them, then we end up with this really bad situation. Whereas if each conspirator pursues the group interest, then the conspirators end up in the best. Then they end up in the very best situation, the top left situation, where they're each in prison for 2 years, but the total number of years in prison is only 4. So if the prisoners could communicate, maybe they could assure each other of their loyalty, and they say, look, I'll be loyal if you're loyal, and the other one says, I'll be loyal if you're loyal. Okay, so they're both going to stay loyal. They each go to prison for 2 years, but they're in prison for a total of only 4 years, and each of them is better off because the other one doesn't put them in prison for 9 or 10 years. So there are actually prisoner's dilemmas all over the place. So murder is an example of a prisoner's dilemma, right? I could go around murdering to get what I want, and that might benefit me some, but the people who are murdered are harmed a lot more than I'm benefited, yeah? Because they lose their lives, I don't get that much back. If we're all willing to murder to get what we want, then we're all going to end up very dead very quickly. So we have the situation where if we all do this action, it's bad for all of us. It's very bad for all of us. For each of us, it's in our self-interest to do it sometimes, but we inflict much more harm on other people than we benefit we get. If we're all willing to abstain from murdering, then we're all going to survive much longer. We're giving up the benefits of the occasional murder, but we're also not inflicting the costs on all these other people. And the same thing is true of much less violent actions. So theft, dishonesty, speeding is a somewhat less sort of extreme example, right? If everybody speeds, then traffic gets really clogged, and that's bad for everybody. If nobody speeds, then traffic flows better, and we're all going to get there fairly quickly. But still, it's in my interest maybe to speed because I can go faster than everybody else, and I benefit from doing it. But if everyone else acts in the same way, then we have a mess. Air pollution is another example. So I drive my car. It produces a very small amount of pollution. I benefit from driving my car much more than the cost of the pollution. But if everybody does this, the cost of the pollution builds up, and the benefits of that we each get from polluting are outweighed by the costs imposed on us by everybody else. So the fundamental issue is that we're very vulnerable. I can be harmed very easily. Others can benefit by harming me, but they benefit from harming. The benefit that they get from harming me is in general much less than the degree to which I can be harmed. So in the prisoner's dilemma, what that means is my conspirator can. I'm vulnerable to them cooperating with the police, informing and defecting. They will benefit from that, but I'm harmed much more than their benefit, right? They get 1 year off, I get 8 years more. So the benefit that they get by harming me is much less than the harm that they inflict on me. So what that means is that if I can get you to lay down your arms and not act out egoistically, that's actually super good for me, because now I'm not vulnerable to being harmed by you anymore, and that's very good for me. And the same is true for you. If you can get me to lay down my arms, that's really good for you, because now you're not, while you were vulnerable, that vulnerability isn't going to be exploited anymore. And the social contract is basically what happens when we do that. So in the prisoner's dilemma, if we could cooperate, if I can get you to lay down your arms and you can get me to lay down my arms, that's best. Because we can't cooperate, we can't make that happen, and as long as we're both self-interested, then we'll end up in that bottom right square, in the worst square. But if I could get you to lay down your arms, that would actually be better for me, what's best for me is getting you to lay down your arms, and that's much better for me than defecting is. I can improve my situation slightly, but you can do a lot more to improve my situation. So we'll be looking then in the next video at how this social contract works out as a response to the prisoner's dilemma.